Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here and see all of you here on this beautiful, beautiful morning. Drove up from San Diego, beautiful drive. So I really want to thank the club for having me today. It's really a big honor. So I'm going to go to this next slide here. Just before I get into it, just a little bit about my team, San Diego Paranormal Research Society. We primarily investigate claims of ghosts and hauntings and of that nature, primarily in San Diego, Southern California area. We're a very dedicated team to investigations and research, historic locations, businesses, private residences, We even offer classes for people that want to learn how to do it. And of course, I present and things of that nature. So if you're interested in reading more, you can go to SanDiegoParanormalResearch.com. And then, of course, my love of writing blended in with the paranormal. I've written some books here. I'm going to go through these really quickly. You can find out more on my website, author NicoleStrickland.com. I also write for Paranormal Underground magazine, paranormalunderground.net, I believe the website is. Really good information on all kinds of different topics relating to the paranormal. And then, of course, here's the show banner for my show, The Afterlife Chronicles. Going through this really quickly because let's get into it. So let me start out with why I got started in this field. It started from a very, very young age, as far back as I can remember. I've always had this curiosity, this innate curiosity and fascination with the unknown, specifically ghosts and spirits in the afterlife. So I was born in Huntington Beach, practically right next door, and then my mom, dad, and I moved to Las Vegas when I was about maybe 1.5 years old. So back then, I had some experiences as a young child, we're talking 4 and 5 years old, that I really couldn't explain. The very first one that I can remember, we had a pool in our backyard, and it was summertime, and it was around dusk, so the sun was starting to set, and my mom, dad, and I got out of the pool. We were drying off, and then all of a sudden, remember, I'm about 4.5 or 5, I saw this dark gray, misty substance or whatever morph into like a humanoid shape. And I remember, I don't know why I remember this, but I distinctly remember saying, "Mommy, Daddy, look at that draft." I don't know why I used draft to explain what I saw, but that's the word I used at 4.5 and 5. So that was my one experience that I recollect really strongly. And then also in that house, I communicated with a male entity that would come through. Now that I'm older, I surmised that maybe he was from the gold rush days, and I would talk to him and visit with him. I'm sure my parents, my mom and dad, my mom's in the audience, by the way, Norma Strickland right over there. I'm sure they were like, okay, well, she's just talking to an imaginary friend, something like that, because I was of the age for that. So experiences way back when I was young. That interest in the paranormal stayed with me throughout elementary, middle school, high school. I would read anything on the subject that I could get my hands on. Now let's fast forward to my undergraduate college years at the University of Arizona. So I'm going to share with you a very profound experience, life-changing for me, that really catapulted me out into the active field of investigating the paranormal. And that was with my maternal grandmother, Helen Lopinto. So obviously that's her on the right, and then me as a baby on the left, and then another picture with her, Helen Lopinto, and then Andrew F. Lopinto, my grandfather, who I will talk about a little bit later. So October 25th, the year 2000, I believe, 2000 or 2001. I think it was 2001. So my grandmother called me up on the phone, and she asked me, "Nicole, are you okay?" And I thought, well, this is odd. Why is she randomly calling me, asking me this? So I talked with her on the phone, had a great conversation, 10, 15 minutes. And then when I got off the phone, let's fast forward to the following day. In the afternoon, my mom called me, and I could tell by the tone of her voice that something wasn't right. And so that's when she proceeded to tell me, "I love you very much, Nicole, but Grandma passed away in the early morning hours around 4:45 a.m. So of course I was devastated, got the first plane out to San Diego, spent a few days there with the family. My grandmother never wanted a funeral, so we just had a private viewing and just had some private time with the family. Then when I got back out to the University of Arizona, I started having experiences in my apartment that I had never endured prior to her passing. Now, at first, I dismissed them because I'm in an apartment, I'm upstairs, it could be my neighbors, it could be vibration, whatever. I just dismissed it. But the first experiences that I started to have were seeing and hearing the doorknob, specifically my front door and my bedroom door, at times would move as if someone's trying to open it. Again, I didn't really think much of it. Now, an interesting caveat to that is my grandmother would go around her house at night and make sure that the doors were locked. Again, I dismissed it. A couple days later, all of this happened within about 4 or 5 days. I was sitting on my bed, on my laptop, doing schoolwork, when all of a sudden, I didn't see anything, but I felt a disembodied hand caress my face. And it felt as if it came from someone I loved and someone that I was very, very close to. That's when I started to wonder and ponder, wow, could this be Helen communicating with me from beyond? So then a couple of nights later, it culminated into, again, I was in my bedroom doing schoolwork on my bed on my laptop, when all of a sudden, out of my left peripheral vision, I saw my grandmother, full-bodied apparition. She looked about 10 years younger. She did not say anything to me, but had a smile on her face. She was wearing one of her favorite blue and white flowered dresses that she used to own. She looked very vibrant, very healthy, and it almost looked as though she had a spotlight shining against her back, creating this white halo around her. The experience played out in real time, probably about 2 seconds, maybe 3, which is a long time in my opinion to have a sighting like that. And then I saw her slowly fade before my eyes. That, right then and there, is when I knew that all those experiences were her. Now, at first, I thought, am I projecting this? Am I causing this because of my grief? But as the years have progressed and in understanding and researching the paranormal, I do believe it was a true visitation, And so I believe that my grandmother knew before I did that I was destined to go down the path of researching the afterlife and the paranormal. So it was that culminating, that life-changing, profound experience that got me on the path of where I am today, and the rest is history. So I am indebted to my grandmother for that. And she does come now and then and visit, specifically around holidays and anniversaries. Another interesting aspect is that my mom's birthday is on October 25th. So my mom, my grandmother's daughter, of course. My grandmother passed on my mom's birthday, October 25th. So I love her so much, and like I said, I'll be talking about her husband, my grandfather, later on in the presentation. So that's what got me started on the path, and I've worked with different paranormal teams for a while, and then 2009, I had the desire to have my own team, and that's when I founded the San Diego Paranormal Research Society, and I've met some amazing people in this work. There are some amazing researchers out there that really dedicate their time to the study of the supernatural and the afterlife. Okay, so let's get into examining the afterlife here. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that I'm a mortal being. I have not been there. So if I were to stand up here and tell you I absolutely know what the afterlife is, well, that wouldn't really be true, right? But I do believe that we mortals are permitted to get glimpses of the afterlife and what awaits us when it's our time to transition through communication with spirit. And so, and even those, I've often been told, Nicole, you're an old soul. So people that recollect their past lives, for example, well, I've heard people say this, and I even say it, well, this isn't my first rodeo. So maybe in our past lives, we might have little glimpses and remembrances of going into the afterlife with the past life. So that's what I want to preface that. So what is an afterlife? I don't think you can really thoroughly examine the afterlife without looking at these aspects. So cultural and religious beliefs, parapsychological research inquiries, scientific studies, specifically near-death experiences, shared death experiences, intuition, mind, body, and spirit, channeling, mediumship, psychic mediumship, evidential mediumship, and of course, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, specifically theories of the survival of human consciousness. And a number 6, which I didn't put on here, but I should have, is the collection around the world from people from all walks of life, their profound personal experiences that they've had with departed loved ones, animals, like I did with my grandmother. So that's looking at all these aspects, I think, really gives us an idea of what the afterlife may be. So I'm not going to go through necessarily all the religious or cultural beliefs, but you'll see that there's this, among cultures and religions, there's this belief in the afterlife, belief in the soul, the immortal soul and the soul moving on, but there might be slight similarities and slight differences depending on that culture. So, and the interest into this goes back to the dawning of man, basically. Back in the Enlightenment period, I don't know, I'm sure some of you have heard of Emanuel Swedenborg. So he was a Swedish scientist and statesman. He thrived during the Enlightenment period. He spent time exploring the spirit world through the physical world. And in his book, Heaven and Hell, he claims that he was allowed to experience the dying process, and be awakened in spirit, and then he would have these nightly dreams of communicating with spiritual energies and of angels and beings. So it goes back, I made the example because it goes back hundreds of thousands of years ago. Even writers back in like the 1300s, Middle Ages, Dante Alighieri, right, with the I think it was 1320. I'm not sure when he wrote it. I want to say it was 1320. But the Divine Comedy, which gives like a visionary view of the afterlife. So other influencers of the time, Plato, Descartes. Plato believed that the soul is immortal, as well as Descartes believed that the soul exists and can separate from the body. So, a lot of different cultural ideals and interest in the paranormal and afterlife, going way back. So I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about the spiritualist movement. So this was a new religious movement from the 1840s to 1920s, and this is a time when people, specifically started in upstate New York, this was a time when people really believed in ghosts and spirits, and that it was possible to contact the deceased and communicate with them. They also believed that the deceased had access to higher knowledge. So the Society for Psychical Research was actually founded London of 1882 to try and disprove a lot of the fraud and fraudulence during the movement with psychic mediums. I have a whole presentation on spiritualism, but I'm just briefly going over it today. So the Society for Psychical Research, their practice is still evident today. They investigated claims of psi experiences, telepathy, ghosts and hauntings, phantasms of the living. It was their 2-volume study. It had over like 700 plus psi experiences. So they were formed to develop a scientific framework to research and study the paranormal, and it's still in existence. Okay, so now let's move into parapsychological research inquiries and looking into those and what those tell us, may tell us about the afterlife. So what do objective and subjective experiences that we have tell us? When I say objective, I'm talking about something in the field of research that's tangible. Perhaps you get an electronic voice phenomena capture on your recorder. That would be an objective type of experience. Or if someone captures an apparition on their camera, that would be objective. Subjective would be more about perhaps what maybe a psychic medium is picking up, or someone sensing, there's sadness in this room. I'm really feeling like someone passed in this room. That's more subjective, but they go hand in hand. You can't, they intertwine basically. So, and some researchers will only count the tangible data and discount the subjective. I disagree with that. I think you really need to look at both ends. So by studying apparitions and hauntings. Before that, let's look at the paranormal. What is the paranormal? The paranormal is phenomena that is not scientifically explainable. It doesn't follow the scientific method. A lot of people think this field is a pseudoscience, which is a culmination of beliefs, views, and practices that claim to be scientific but don't fit the scientific model. I believe we're kind of in between that, and I think if we really devote our time, the paranormal can be a legitimate scientific type of community. So looking at apparitions, there's a whole different types of apparitions. That's a whole nother presentation, and different types of hauntings throughout locations everywhere in the world. So a haunting, in my definition, would be a location where the spiritual energies that are there somehow connect with that site's history. So they have some sort of link with the historical tapestry of that location. Looking at thousands and thousands of spirit voices on tape, so electronic voice phenomena, voice captures on recording devices that are not heard by the naked ear at the time, but when you go back and review your recording, you hear them. So looking at all of that, ITC is instrumental transcommunication, which is like EVP, but it's, again, you're capturing spirit voices potentially, but you're hearing it in real time, okay? So some famous people that studied this: Thomas Edison, he invented the ghost machine, or telephone to the dead ghost machine. Attila von Szalay, I think is how you pronounce it, and Raymond Bayless were heavy in EVP research, and they devised an apparatus which had a microphone inside a sequestered cabinet linked to an external microphone, and they captured a very famous spirit vocalization that said "Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all." Konstantin Radive, his book Breakthrough, if you haven't read that, please do, it's amazing. I think it was published I want to say 1971, I might be wrong on that date, but I believe it was in the 1970s. Him and Frederick Jurgensen have over 100,000 different tapes of spirit voices. Sarah Estep, she founded the American Association for Electronic Voice Phenomena. Todd Bates, my co-host for Haunted Voices Radio, was in a sense mentored by Sarah, and he mentored me a lot, so I kind of feel like I was vicariously mentored through her. Now ITC was coined by Dr. Ernst Senkowski in the early 70s and 1980s, and he feels with ITC there's a big intuitive psychic connection. So these are some very, very well-known people back when all ITC and spirit voices were beginning to be studied. Now I do have an actual example of an EVP that I captured, it was 2009, and it was at the Lincoln Theater in Decatur, Illinois, and I'm the California coordinator of the Ghost Research Society, headed up by Dale Kaczmarek. And we were investigating the Lincoln Theater, and we were down in the dressing rooms. And so Harry Houdini used to perform there. So it was myself and my friends and colleagues, Nicole Tito and Lisa Crick, just the three of us, and we were down there doing an EVP session. So you'll hear me ask the question, what are you going to perform tonight? Then you'll hear a word that's said, which is the EVP, and then you'll hear me ask, what are you getting ready for? So this is something that we did not hear in real time, and it was only captured on my recorder and Nicole's recorder, but not Lisa's. So let's see if it'll play here.
What are you going to perform tonight? Magic. What are you getting ready for?
Magic, EVP.
What are you going to perform tonight? Magic. What are you getting ready for?
Okay, so Class A EVP, pretty much everyone agrees to that. I have so many of them, we'd be here all day, so I'm just going to do that one. But we have some other ones on our website, SanDiegoParanormalResearch.com. So now let's move into paranormal phenomena in the environment, examining environmental monitoring and how that fits in with paranormal phenomena. So let's see, I'm going to go to this slide. And then, of course, after that, we'll talk a little bit about psi phenomena. So let's go here real quick. I'm going to skip over pareidolia, apophenia, and tulpas for the time being, and let's just look at some environmental monitoring. So we've all heard of infrasound, which is below human hearing, and it's thought that in that state, people can become more hypersensitized to connecting with the spirit world, and also being able to talk with them as well. But also, it's thought that maybe spiritual entities communicate through infrasound. It's easier for them. So when you investigate the paranormal, different theories as to what causes the paranormal. Electromagnetism, right? It's thought that high EMF can really increase paranormal activity and leading to more experiences. Ionic types of energy, it's thought, okay, let's do an investigation during a thunderstorm. So any surface charged with an electricity will cause ions. So it's thought that ghosts and energies are theorized to disrupt the ionic energy. You can have temperature fluctuations, drops, even increases, radiation differentials, weather patterns, investigating during a full moon. It's thought the veil is the thinnest. Geomagnetic storms, so disruption in the Earth's magnetic field. Solar storms, the sun creates these solar flares that send charged particles to Earth, then causing some sort of magnetic shift. This is all theorized to increase paranormal activity, but make it easier for us to potentially communicate with the departed. Let's see, and then psychokinesis, coined by Henry Holt in 1914 with his book on the cosmic relations, the mind's ability to influence an object. So there might be this psychokinetic interplay between us and the departed and the spirit world. So now let's look into, the point I'm trying to make here is that with all the data out there, going back years and years and years from all over the world, you have to look at what is, and sift through it and look at what is authentic paranormal spiritual phenomena versus phenomena that is thought to be paranormal in nature but can be explained away. So you have to be careful of things like pareidolia and apophenia. Pareidolia basically is the expression of apophenia. So apophenia is finding connection in the unrelated. I was trying to think of that word. So finding connections in the unrelated, and pareidolia is the mind's ability, or the mind's trying to make sense out of a location. So like looking at faces in the clouds, right? So we have to be careful as researchers to not let that confuse us. And then, of course, tulpas, there's a whole presentation on that. Tulpas is a big one. So it's a Tibetan word meaning emanation or manifestation. And so it's basically when you give thought to, when you give thought a lot of concentration, it can maybe start to take its own life form. So a big example that a lot of people are familiar with is in James Hilton's novel, Shangri-La, Lost Horizon in the fictional paradise of Shangri-La. So it's looking at, again, trying to make sense of what is authentic in nature versus something that can be explained or something that we humans cause. So out of the percentage of true, authentic paranormal phenomena, we are left with, okay, what does this tell us? It points to some sort of survival of consciousness. It points to that something that our soul potentially can move on, and that there is some sort of life after death. And let's see here. I believe too that there, between both worlds, the spirit world and the mortal world, I think that there's something going on in the cosmos that is drawing it together and helping it to intertwine more strongly, and I'll talk about that in a little bit later. So, and then moving on to, I'm going to skip over, my slides are out of order, looking at all the channeling and psychic mediums. Now I'm talking about authentic channeling, not what people think they are channeling, authentic channeling, intuition, and all of that, and how that helps us communicate with the afterlife. Reincarnation, which is more retrospective in nature. It's a retrospective type of study. It's mainly a Buddhist and Hindu belief that the soul is reborn in another body after physical death. So there's a psychiatrist, Ian Stevenson, who studied, gosh, I want to say around 2,500 cases of reincarnation. People that, children claiming things that they could not know prior to having or being reborn in that body. So had no way of knowing, possessing talents that the deceased had, maybe similar physical attributes that the deceased had. We all remember Kalpana Chawla. She was the Indian astronaut on the STS-107 Columbia shuttle. Now there's a little girl that claimed, very, very young little girl that claimed that she was her. She said, "I'm Kalpana." And she knew things about Kalpana that she could not have previously known. So looking at how reincarnation plays into it all as well. So all these little sub-components, I guess, of studying the afterlife need to be really looked at, and it gives us a bigger picture of what may await us when we go on. So I also want to go into deathbed visitations, and the point I want to make here is many people will have these in the days, weeks, and hours prior to passing. They will experience and connect with deceased loved ones, friends, animals, spirit guides. So I feel that right there, in a way, is a crash course for them, so that when they move on to the afterlife, they're more prepared to communicate with their surviving loved ones. It's like a domino effect. That's how I take it. And so this is very common in hospice patients. 20 to 30% of hospice patients, or even more, experience it. A lot of the nurses will through the patients and be able to witness this as well. And then these patients, it gives them a sense of peace to connect with their loved ones right prior to when they pass, so that when they pass, it's a very, very peaceful situation for them. My mom, Norma, has a couple stories that she wants to share with you, because she's a school nurse now, but she was a hospice nurse, and she wants to share a couple of experiences that she had, and then as well with my grandfather, Harry, my dad's, he wasn't my dad's dad, but my paternal grandmother's husband. So if you want to share that.
As a hospice nurse, which I worked for several years, what I observed during the death of patients is I saw sometimes them struggling a little bit. And then after I spoke to families and said, talk to them, let them know you're going to be okay.
It's okay. It's okay. It's all right.
I'm a crier.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. You're fine. You're fine.
And so once I got families to do that, you could see the relief on the dying patient. So because I'm at an age now where who knows when I'm going to go, it's important for us to, if we witness a family, a loved one, to make sure that you console them. That's the biggest thing for me, so that they can transition into the afterlife with peace, because I would think that that's going to keep them after they pass away. And I know Nicole's mentioned some spirits stay earthbound, and heck, I want to go home. I don't know about you. I want to be able to go home. I don't want to. I've been on Earth, so let's move to the next level. But with my father, real quickly, my father was a physician. He ended up getting Alzheimer's, so it was difficult to see the last year of his life, his illness. But when he was getting ready to pass, and we were able to keep him at home, when he was getting ready to pass, I went outdoors on the front steps, and I sat there, and it was evening, and the stars were out, and I had such anxiety, and I felt so much pain to see him go. But all of a sudden, within a minute out there, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, overwhelming. And so it was just shortly after that my daddy passed away. So that was his message. I am so sorry. I'm such a crier. That's why I could never speak of this anyway. Okay. So I love to listen to her presentations. It's an honor to be here. You have such a beautiful and peaceful community. I hope you enjoy it every day. It's gorgeous up here.
Also, Harry, too. I was in the room when so my paternal grandmother, Marion Strickland, her husband, I was in the room when he was passing. And my mom was the last person to come, and it was my mom, myself, and his daughters in the room. And he was literally just like minutes away from passing, and you could see the breathing rate decrease a little bit. He was listening to his one of his favorite songs by Roy Orbison. It's the song "Crying." That came on, but it just all of a sudden this tremendous peace came over the entire room. We were all just like experiencing it, and then he peacefully passed, and you could feel, in a way, you could feel him release and move on, and I was the one to go notify the other family. That really doesn't pertain to necessarily a deathbed visitation, but I wanted to make sure to share that as well. So the point with deathbed visitations, in my opinion, is the people I think are very honored and very lucky to have that experience, because their loved ones, their spirit guides, the afterlife is coming for them and telling them it's okay, and it gives them that opportunity to get acquainted with it. And then when they pass on, and if they choose to communicate and connect with their surviving loved ones, I think it's a little bit easier. So, okay, let me put this away because I have notes here. So let's move on. There's a lot to get through. Let's go back to NDEs. I want to get into NDEs a little bit. Do near-death experiences hold the keys to understanding life after death? I think near-death experiences, we can't talk about that without mentioning Raymond Moody. He coined it. His book, Life After Life, is a really good read if you haven't read it. I think it's one of the gateways to really allowing the mortal world to commune and connect with the afterlife. So a near-death experience is a profound, life-changing encounter or heightened sense of awareness during extreme physiologic conditions. So maybe someone's in cardiac arrest, maybe they have deep anesthesia, maybe whatever the case is that usually happens, and they're able to, in a sense, perhaps pass on but be brought back to life. So some physicians will say, have theories that can explain it, like maybe it's due to pathopsychology, maybe it's due to transformed blood gases, maybe it's due to sleep problems, whatever. But there are a lot of theories out there that suggest that it's something other than just a pure medical phenomenon. So traits now. A lot of people will, and let me say this, people from all over the world, we're talking children, adults, the elderly from all over the world experience similar traits and symptoms when having this. So that says something. That has to say something. So they may feel a big sense of peace, a sense of love, free of pain, no fear anymore, a sensation of leaving the body, the tunnel, seeing the bright white light at the end, seeing figures at the end, maybe they're deceased family members there waiting for them, being able to float above the body and see what the doctors are doing, a sensation of when they get to that, near that light, they don't want to leave. They want to go into it, and when they're brought back and their heart starts beating again, they have a heightened sense of spirit. They lose interest in monetary situations. They lose interest in materialism and greed, and have this renewed sense of love and peace, and they want to help and do good for the world. So those are some of the common traits, of course, to the life in review. They will have that life in review. They will, again, sometimes encounter deceased loved ones and friends. And what's interesting to me, too, is when they come back, and I've interviewed people that have had NDEs on my show, and a lot of them have said that they experienced going into a very beautiful paradise type of environment, colors more vivid than what we see on Earth when we're alive, and that they're able to shape their surroundings similar to what their cultural background is. I've heard that, too. So all these traits are so similar among people, a renewed spiritual purpose. And so the question is, are NDEs due to a medical phenomenon? I personally, now I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I personally think that I don't think medicine can explain it. I think it's something divine that happens. That's just me. But again, I've not experienced one to know. But there is a neuroscientist and professor from Thomas Jefferson University, Andrew Newberg. I guess he studied the brain scans of people when they were in a meditative state, and he feels that the peripheral, why people get that tunnel vision is that the peripheral vision starts to go first, and that's why people see that tunnel vision. And then I guess it's the central part of the visual system that shuts down first. And then he talks about upon death. Now in life, we know this, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems. They counteract each other in life. Parasympathetic is to calm us down, relax us. The sympathetic is to excite, right? So he says, well, in death, they don't oppose each other. They work together, and that causes a sense of slowing down in visions. That's just his thought. I don't know. But I think there's something more to it than just medicine. So let's see, how is the mind involved? So it's thought that maybe the mind is separate from the body and not controlled by the laws of physics. So a religious spiritual view claims that our minds are in the universe, and that mind is connected to a greater sense of collective consciousness. And some people will say, okay, it's prana, it's God, it's enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. The mind is potentially part of the neuron types of activity in the brain. It's a byproduct of it, so it can't be weighed or measured. I hope everything's okay out there. So there's another theory, the OR. I'm actually going to get to that later on when I talk a little bit about quantum mechanics, but I want to briefly talk about some studies. There are tons of NDE studies, but one in particular is the New York University's Langone Medical Center, headed up by, I'm sure we've heard of him before, Dr. Sam Parnia. He is in critical care medicine and the director of resuscitation research. So he led a study called the AWARE study, where 15 different hospitals in the US and Europe studied 2,060 patients. And so to sum it up, he says that with advances in medicine, they're able to bring people back to life and intricately study them when they briefly pass. So he feels, based on his studies, that the cells in our brain are not obliterated upon death. They go through a process of decay which can take hours to weeks, and that gives them time to study the brain. So he, in this study, up to around, I'm not sure exactly on the statistics because different articles say different numbers, but around 40% of those who came back to life had some sort of perception of what was going on. 10% had a very, very deeply spiritual experience, and 2% had full awareness of what was going on. Now, he says some of patients may have had full awareness perhaps, but maybe lost it due to medications or some other situation. So he talks about having these people have consciousness and awareness during like a 3-minute span when their heart is not beating. The University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies also is very renowned with NDE research. Dr. Emily Williams Kelly, in one of her studies, found that, and I should have talked about this previously, 41% of dying patients encountered deceased loved ones, animals, friends in the days and hours leading up to their death. I also want to discuss very quickly what veridical NDEs are. So a veridical NDE is a situation when someone is able to recount information that they could not have known prior. So an example is the little boy who briefly passed from the ruptured appendix. I think the story was the basis for Heaven is for Real, I believe, the book and then the movie. So he passed. He was declared deceased. They brought him back to life, and he came back and said that he communicated with a deceased sister that he didn't know he had. So, example of that. So veridical NDEs. So NDEs, I think, in my opinion, are a big gateway that can really allow us to understand and glimpse what may await us when we pass on. Okay, so soul and consciousness. All right. People vary in terms of what they believe a soul is, what they believe consciousness is. How I interpret it and how I explain it is, are they separate? Are they the same? I believe that if they're separate, they depend on each other deeply. So I feel that consciousness is the expression of the soul. Now, there's different levels of consciousness, right? I'm not going to really get into the ego and the superego and the id and, Carl Jung, his levels of consciousness. But I'm talking, of course, there's everyday consciousness, like you have to, when your alarm goes off in the morning, you have to get up and go to work, right? I'm specifically relating to the higher consciousness, that I feel that the soul, the consciousness is the expression of the soul. So that's why I have this little Venn diagram here to kind of make that point there. And so I'm not going to really get into too much on levels of consciousness because that would take up a lot of time, because I do have some other stories I want to share, so I want to get to that. Another hypothesis is the living soul hypothesis. So the human soul comprises the very essence of a human being. What our truth is, our pure selves, that's what I believe the soul is. It comprises our essence, our memories, our psyche. It connects our individual intelligence with collective intelligence, and I believe it can separate from the body at any given time and move on. And we all know that, Emil, I don't know if it's Emily or Emil Durkheim, really studied heavily on collective consciousness. And then, of course, shared consciousness allows us to share beliefs, values, and perspectives. So I think our soul, when we're in tune with it and in touch with it, we can really connect with that heightened area of shared consciousness. Okay, and there's this quote here, and I like it because it matches my thought about the afterlife, so I thought I'd read it. So the authors of the book, The Afterlife Experiments, they say, if the living soul hypothesis is true and we develop our abilities to hear what the dead have to say to us, perhaps human deceit might come to an end. It's possible that we could enter a new era of human caring that Linda and I call integrity love. We would be strongly encouraged, to put it mildly, to take responsibility for our actions, transforming the way we live our daily lives. And as more of us openly look to the deceased for everyday guidance, this potential could make life easier, safer, and rewarding. And so that's a premise that I highlight and talk about in my new book, The Afterlife Chronicles, and I'm donating 2 copies to the club, by the way. So when I first read that, I was like, wow, that matches my whole perception and perspective on it. So interesting there. So let me move here. The cosmic reservoir hypothesis, coined by Professor William James, he feels that all the things that occurred since the dawning of man are deposited in the cosmos, whereby a channeler, it could be any one of us, can access the info, kind of similar to the Akashic records in a way. And it supports why the energetic essence of an individual and an individual's life and memories never really goes away. So I think that that's really interesting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, because I want to leave time for stories, quantum theories and life after death. Some of these get real heavy in science, so I'm going to try to explain it the best in lay terms, so even for me to understand. So quantum physics is the study of the smallest microscopic particles of matter, their nature, their behavior, their characteristics. So basically, subatomic quantum particles of matter can behave both as particles and waves and be in 2 places at the same time. So it really gets into like parallel dimensions, bilocation, talks about time. Is time linear, or is the past, present, and future all mixed into one? Really gets into that. And so I'm going to talk about 3 theories here, and specifically. The first one, does consciousness live in a quantum state after death? Can quantum mechanics predict or explain life after death? The Max Planck Institute for Physics, so leading quantum physicist by the name of Max Planck, said in a 1931 interview with The Observer, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing postulates consciousness. So this particular theory feels that the physical universe that we live in and reside in is only our perception, and an infinite beyond exists once we transition. So they feel that our physical lives, our mortal lives, are already surrounded by an afterlife. It's not like in some far away land, way out there, hard to reach. So they believe in this concept of immortality, and that the body, when the body ceases to function, the soul leaves but exists in that quantum state, okay? And then they talk a little bit about wave-particle duality. I'm not going to really get into that. Basically, they say that if there is a quantum code for all living things, including deceased, then there's an existence of an afterlife. And I found this quote, which I think is interesting, so I'm going to read it. Former head of the MPI, Max Planck Institute, Dr. Hans-Peter Durr, he said this. He said, just as a particle writes all of its information on its wave function, the brain is the tangible floppy disk on which we save our data. And this data is then uploaded into the spiritual quantum field. So the body, the physical disk, is gone, but consciousness, the computer data, lives on. What we consider the here and now, the world, it is actually just the material level that is comprehensible. The beyond is an infinite reality that is much bigger, okay? So now going into orchestrated objective reduction, a quantum theory on consciousness. This was studied by Sir Roger Hamrose and Dr. Stuart Hamrow of the University of Arizona. Go Wildcats, my alma mater, right? Cool. Okay, so they, in their study and their theory, feel that consciousness is merely deposited at the subatomic level, at a quantum level, orchestrated objective reduction. And so I'm just going to read this. Consciousness happens at the space-time area in the brain. So when the metabolism, they consider the brain's quantum logic, when it decreases, the quantum information disperses back into the space-time area of the universe. That which remains interconnects with everything, and consciousness may live on. So they feel that consciousness, in a way, exists in the microtubules in our cell. It's a structural constituent of our cells. And they feel that they hold this quantum information at the subatomic level. And then self-consciousness basically is the effect of gravity on those microtubules. I know it's way out there. But more in layman's terms, if consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, then it has the same material that comprises the universe, which has existed since the dawning of time. And they say this material cannot be destroyed once a person is beyond the threshold of death. It dispenses out in the universe. Consciousness will return to the universe, and then which will allow our souls to filter back into its elemental truth. So another way of looking at it. And then I don't know, it's someone affiliated with MPI, but they say this. If they're not revived, of course referring to the patients, and the patient dies, it's possible that this quantum information can exist outside the body, perhaps indefinitely as a soul, okay? One other that I want to talk briefly about is biocentrism. Robert Lanza is very heavy in this book. He wrote an entire book on it. He renowned a physician, scientist. He studies stem cell research, cloning, and then is very heavily involved in degenerative medicine. So he feels that consciousness creates reality, or creates the universe and reality, not vice versa. So he feels that time and space are illusions that our mind manifests. So, and again, he feels that life is immortal, it's at the center of the universe, and that when we die, he actually doesn't even believe in death. When I've read his book, he claims, he questions, is death really real? But let's assume it is, of course. When we die, our energy lives on and travels to another universe or dimension. So the consciousness, he feels, exists in our bodies and then is released to the universe or moves on upon our bodies ceasing to function when our bodies die. So a little bit on quantum mechanics. It gets very in-depth and it can be kind of boring, but I find these three theories kind of fascinating. So this is my favorite part of the presentation because I think this ties it in. Examining the profound connectedness between the living and afterlife. Love and connection. These three things I'm going to talk about. Love and connection, synchronicity, astral travel, specifically as it pertains to dream visitations. Love is eternal. The bonds that we have with our fellow loved ones, our relatives, our friends, our animals, even those we didn't really know that well, that love, that connection, that exists regardless. Death can't interfere with it, basically. That exists, that's eternal. Those physically gone, they're not physically here with us anymore, but their essence, their soul, what makes them them, that's still with us at all times. It's evident in our shared memories. It's how that happens that remains elusive. But I feel that I don't know if the how and why is so important. What's important is the experience. Is the study, is the interest that we have and the openness that we have in studying and reading up on the afterlife and the other side, is that fueling both the mortal world and the afterlife to connect with each other more and more? I don't know. I said this earlier briefly, but I believe that there's some elusive cosmic shift going on that maybe we're not meant to understand that is allowing us to connect with the afterlife and vice versa. I think the living world and the hereafter they're very much intertwined and they can help each other. And so that's my belief. So, I mean, think about it. Nowadays with people hurting each other, the challenges, the turmoil, COVID-19, perhaps that is why more and more, or one of the reasons why more and more people as of late are having these beautiful, profound experiences with their departed loved ones. And we're all connected. We're all a part of something greater. There's good in each of us. Now imagine if each of us tapped into that, what our pure energy is, what our pure soul, how the world would be if each of us tapped into that. And more people too are wanting and desiring to attune themselves to higher consciousness, so being attuned to their higher selves and reaching that higher vibration that allows us to and allows them to really reach their true self and soul's true purpose, if you will. So I want to get into synchronicity. What does synchronicity have to do with it? I think synchronicity is another gateway for us to really have a relationship with our departed loved ones. And it was originated by a psychologist, Carl Jung, to describe circumstances that appear meaningful but lack a causal connection. So when these experiences happen, they link you to that higher consciousness sort of state. They can provide life-changing and profound connections with spirit. And how many of you have experienced synchronicity? Okay, practically every hand goes up, right? It's one of those situations that is hard to explain, but you know when it happens. It's something where you just know, your soul knows, and you won't doubt it. And it's like the message comes to you and there's no doubting what that message means. And for me, if I'm out consciously seeking it, I don't experience it as much. It's when I'm not seeking it when it comes through. So you can have these sorts of synchronous encounters in various ways, through messages, through songs, through artifacts, repeated messages. If you're getting repeated messages, pay attention to that. So I want to share a few examples here of this. So my cats, my beloved litter mates, they are both passed now. They're both spirits. So Max is on the left, and then in the right photo, Max is on the left and Kaylee's on the right. So Max, I adopted them after the 2003 San Diego wildfires. And so, and I've had cats all my life, but let me tell you, the bond and connection that I have with these two cats, and I love all my animals, don't get me wrong, but there's just some greater connection. So I do believe that we're a part of the same soul group. That's just my thought. So Max passed away in 2016 to cardiomyopathy. So one night, he started breathing really fast, hyperventilating. My mom and I, she was there for me. We rushed him to the hospital. The doctors brought him back, and the doctor said, it could be a reaction to the beta blockers they put him on, or more tragically, it could be heart failure. So we went out in the waiting room as they had him in the back room, examining him and doing the tests. About 30, 40 minutes passed. And I could see down the hallway the door to the back area. I saw the doctor come out, and I knew by the look on his face that it wasn't good. And the song that started playing on the above speakers was the song Endless Love. And it was a synchronous moment because I knew that the message was, I'm on my way out, but please know that my love is endless. I just knew it. So the doctor came out and he said, I'm really sorry to tell you, but Max is going into heart failure. So it was the following day when he transitioned, and it was very peaceful. My mom and I were in the back room when it happened, and I was talking to him as they were administering the medications to commence his transition, if you will. And I just looked at him and I said, I love him. I just was talking to him and telling him how much I love him. And he died around 4:45 or passed around 4:45 p.m. I might think it might be 4:44. I don't know, because I see those numbers all the time. My grandmother Helen passed 4:45 a.m., Max around 4:45 p.m. But throughout life, I'm not even thinking about the clock. It could be a license plate number. It could be a sign. I will just happen to see it. 444, 444, 444. I think that's a reminder. And it's when synchronicity, you can't doubt it. When it happens, you instantly know what that message is, and it's a beautiful thing. So Kaylee, Max's sister on the right, in the right picture. Kaylee lived another 6 years after Max. She passed away at 18 and a half, and she was a very intelligent, beautiful cat. And she was, the last 2 or 3 years of her life, was dealing with not only diabetes, but hyperthyroidism. They found a little nodule on her lung that they thought maybe was cancerous. And then in December of 2021, she got real sick, and they determined that it was a different type of heart failure that Max had, but it was some sort of heart failure, restrictive cardiomyopathy, I think it was. And so I told Kaylee, they had her in the hospital. They brought her back home, and I was allowed some golden moments with her for the next few days. And I told her, I said, Kaylee, because her and I, just a magical bond, the three of us, but her and I as well, because we had those 6 years without Max, so we really, really bonded. I said, Kaylee, let me know when you're ready. And she did. She let me know when she was ready. I just knew it. I could sense it from her. And we took her in the afternoon to the veterinary specialty hospital, UC Davis Veterinary Specialty Hospital in Sorrento Valley in San Diego. And one of her favorite veterinarians happened to be on duty that day. And the transition was extremely peaceful. The veterinarian was even crying. The most peaceful transition I've ever endured in an animal with Kaylee. And I've been through many of them. And Kaylee's was just absolutely as peaceful as it could be. Right after she passed, even the veterinarian was like, I feel her around me. I feel her everywhere. And it was a series of little synchronicities that occurred after that. The way the light was shining in, there was a long hallway, and at the end of it, the way the sunlight was shining through, it was so bright and so peaceful. We went to In-N-Out on the way home. I wasn't even hungry, but that's where we stopped. And then on the way home, I happened to just it's not like I was looking around. My eyes glanced right at a billboard, which had a finger holding a bright, bright, bright orb of light. The next day, when I was driving to Starbucks, I saw two birds flying and dancing in unison, unlike anything I've ever seen before. And I knew that was their way of saying, we're reunited once again. I also had a dream I'll get to dream visitations with Kaylee in a bit, but I also had a dream where in the dream I understood it as Kaylee was showing me 3 kittens that looked very similar, and they were all in a row and they were looking up. And in the dream, Kaylee was telling me, look, Mom, Max, myself, and our brother are reunited, because when I adopted Max and Kaylee, they did have a brother, but I would have adopted him as well, but he was quite sick, and I don't know what happened to him. So all these beautiful synchronicities. With my grandpa, Andrew F. Lopinto, in the first slide, he again, was a physician. He was a lieutenant commander, I think, on the USS Ormsby in World War II, medical officer. So we had the full military honors funeral. And on the way to the funeral, the song Unchained Melody was playing. And throughout my life since then, it'll come on at times when I'm thinking about him. There's been at least 5 or 6, 7 times. Now, this next experience, don't pay attention to the religious aspect of it. I want you to pay attention to the symbolism of it. On the way back from my grandfather's funeral, now I was 13 years old at the time. The night before he passed, or the morning that he passed, we were staying at their house in Kensington in San Diego, and I actually woke up in bed and knew he had passed. I said, okay, Grandpa, he passed. So I went downstairs, and of course, my mom, my aunt, I believe, and Grandma were sitting in the kitchen, and they told me. And I was able to go back there and talk to him and tell him how much I loved him. And I smelt like a slight sense of a rose, which I guess is really common. So fast forward to his funeral services. On the way back from that, we went back to my grandmother's house. We were all exhausted. And I go up the stairs because I was staying in my mom and her sister's old bedroom. So when I walked up the stairs, I noticed on the floor there was a picture that had apparently fallen, and it broke in a bunch of pieces. And in the picture, it had like a plastic Jesus on the cross. Now, I forgot to mention, my grandfather passed away from Alzheimer's. So when I was 13 years old, I saw him rapidly decline during that past year, and it was horrible to see that. Horrible. So again, back to when I walked upstairs after the funeral and I saw this picture broken on the floor, the Jesus portion was off the cross. It had separated from the cross. Even again, no religion here, it's the symbolism. At 13 years old, I knew that represented that he was no longer bound by the restrictions of Alzheimer's. That was just symbolism to me, and I understood that at 13 years old. And it's not something that I was trying to understand. That's what came to me. That's what some greater beyond wanted me to understand at the age of 13. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of astral projection and dream visitations. I'm right on time, I believe. I believe dream visitations with our departed loved ones are another gateway to connecting with the afterlife. So now, astral projection, out-of-body experiences by themselves, not so much, but I'm talking about them in conjunction with a dream visitation. So during a dream visitation, we are allowed to tap into our greater consciousness. We are allowed to connect with our divine loved ones. And it can occur in a hypnagogic, like almost when you're falling asleep state, or it can occur in a state when you're trying to wake up. And those who have had it know what I'm talking about. It's something that is unlike a dream. It's very profound. You're given messages in it. Let's see, the encounters are usually brief, but very, very lucid and very, very meaningful. You will wake up with a huge, huge sense of peace. Heightened sensations upon waking, sensing that your loved one is present with you. You understand that the dream imparts a deeper message, like the example I gave of the 3 kittens. Now, the experience that I've had very quickly, it's hard for me to summarize this, but after Kaylee passed, I will say December 19th, 2021 is when she passed. It's been 14 times that I've had this experience since that time. And it always happens in the same environment. It's in my bedroom, when I'm laying in bed, the lights are off, same environment. And I'm able to move. Now, if you had a camera on me, I guarantee you probably that I would just be in a very still state. But my astral state is slightly out, and I'm able to move and connect with Kaylee on her level when she comes. It's like we meet in the middle. And these are extremely, extremely profound. And it's always, like I said, the same environment. I feel Kaylee walking on the bed. I'm able to open my eyes and physically see her, hear her with my ears. I'm able to, she usually walks around my pillow, jumps up on my desk, comes back on me. There have been times in the dream where she's come up on my chest, laid down and nestled her head against me. There have been times where I'm able to pick her up and hold her, and we're connecting in this state. It is an absolute pure dream visitation because you just know. It's like synchronicity, you just know, and it's extremely, extremely profound. And I've never had that with anyone else, any other animal, even a human that's departed. There's something with Kaylee, and I always, Kaylee has always been very, very intelligent in life. And I actually told my mom, I said, I wouldn't be surprised when Kaylee passes and it's her turn. I wouldn't be surprised if she ascends very quickly into the ranks of spirithood. But whatever it is it's beautiful, and it's very intermittent, but it's happened 14 times since December 19th, 2021. Let's see, so very, very profound. I wanted to say, I forgot to read that quote, oh well. We're getting toward the end here, which is good because, we can, if there's questions and stuff. I forgot to flash this slide. I knew there was another one. So that's just various pictures of Kaylee there. Beautiful, beautiful cat. I love her so much. And I wrote this. Now, this was not supposed to be a book. It was an article, and I wrote it for myself because it was very cathartic. And it talks about my bonds with Max and Kaylee. It talks about all the spiritual experiences that I've had with both of them. And so it's actually, you can download it on my website for free. It's authorNicoleStrickland.com. I did put it up on Amazon for I think like 2 books. But if you want to read it, it is authorNicoleStrickland.com. On the homepage, if you scroll down, I believe you can still download it. And then, of course, I'm donating 2 of these copies to the club of my new book, The Afterlife Chronicles. So it's ebook, paperback, and hardback. Right now it's just available on Amazon International, and then I'm going to also be publishing it on Ingram Spark next week to get it to worldwide distribution. But it was a labor of love to write, lots of different topics in the book, and then about 18 different contributors shared very profound stories with spirit that they've had, and these stories are intertwined in the book and help to support the topics that are discussed. So, and then here's all my links and websites, social media, if you're interested. But I want to end by saying, I've been asked on radio shows, what is the one message that your book, The Afterlife Chronicles, what is the one message that you want people to understand, the takeaway point? I would say 1 or 2 sentences that the connections that we have between our loved ones, those are always going to be with you. I know the loss of someone physically is dreadful, it's hurtful, but always remember that they're always with you, even though you can't see them. Their essence, their pure essence, they're always with you. And then there's a beautiful, beautiful connection between the mortal world and the afterlife. I feel that the afterlife is a very, very, very beautiful place that we go to. And again, I do not believe that maybe we're allowed as mortals to know everything about it, but we're allowed to get glimpses through all of these experiences that we have that let us know that something very beautiful and very loving awaits us when we pass. And so physical death is really not the end. It's really the beginning. So, thank you.
Do you give private readings?
Good question. So, and I should have mentioned this during the presentation. I believe we are all capable of we all have intuition. We are all innately intuitive. We all have the ability and capacity to be psychic, to channel energies, if you will. I don't overly classify myself as a psychic medium because I take it very serious, and it's something that needs to be done without ego. It's something that needs to be done with humility and heart. And so, no offense to all the psychic mediums out there, but I've met many that are not in it for the right reasons and sadly are in it for themselves. So I haven't really done private readings. Maybe I will explore that in the future, but if you're interested, I can recommend some people for you, for sure.
I was just wondering if you could tell me what this is, in the different synchronicity and different things like that. But I was with a friend. She takes the bus a couple times a month to go to Laguna Beach. We were in Laguna Beach. She said, I really checked out I called, I found out this, she checked out the schedule somehow, not computer, because she's not computer savvy. So we were going back, and she said, we were going back to the bus depot, and she said, we have a lot of time. So she takes her purse, she's got it on like something outside, trash, I hate to say a trash can, but something. And she's organizing her purse or finding something. And I said, Flo, we have got to go. The bus is going to be there. She said, no, I researched it this way, that way, blah, 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 I don't know. And so then she starts to go into Whole Foods, I think is the name of the store. And I said, Flo, the bus is going to be there. And it was bad because it was like one of the last buses, or there was a long time between, it just wasn't going to, it was bad if we missed it. Right. Anyway, so we walked to the bus depot and our bus pulled up. So what would that be called?
That to me is more like trusting your innate intuition speaking to you.
Oh.
Yeah, but it could be, I think you could bring in synchronicity with that too, but that's like, we have those, and innate intuition is like our survival compass, but you could equate synchronicity with it in a little bit, so that's a really cool story. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
You mentioned throughout things like earthbound spirits, and thinking like paranormal ghosts and things. Are they similar?
That's a good, yeah, you know what? That's a very good question. So just so I understand, you're asking if ghost and spirit is the same thing. Is that, okay, so this is an excellent question. And it's very easy to use ghost and spirit interchangeably, but I believe, and many researchers in the field believe, there is a difference. There's similarities, but there is a difference. A ghost or an earthbound, of course, is the energy of a person that's passed on, but for some reason, voluntary, involuntary, stays on this realm. Maybe he or she is attached to a home. Maybe he or she sadly, tragically died a very sudden death and just is kind of in limbo, doesn't really know to move on, whatever the reason is, whether it's unfinished business, there's a tie to this plane, making it difficult for that ghost or earthbound to move on. Now, a spirit, of course, the energy of someone that's passed on, is able to move and ascend more to the higher levels of spirithood and come back to this plane free will. So that's kind of how we try to differentiate the two. So,
talking about experiences, I had something phenomenal happen, and going to the beginning of this whole sad experience, my brother passed away in November from esophageal cancer. He didn't get the diagnosis until October, and when we got the diagnosis, we were in his home. It was a teleconference with the doctor, and he was basically told that he was dying. And so to try and cheer up the atmosphere, he put on the Beach Boys music to try and make it a little less sad. And when the song came on, God only knows what I would be without you, I broke down crying. He put his arms around me and I buried my head in his chest and started to cry. Well, he passed away November 17th, and fast forward, I was on my way to my niece's house, who has a 7-year-old daughter, and when I got into the car, that song was the first song that came on. And I started sobbing, because I knew. Cried the whole way to my brother's house. When I mean to my niece's house, my brother's daughter's house. When I got to her house, her husband was coming out the front door. He says, just go ahead and go on in. So I didn't knock on the door, ring the doorbell. I just walked in and I couldn't find her and her daughter. Hello, walking down the hallway. And they were lying down in the bedroom because her little girl was crying because she could hear somebody crying. And they were both crying together because they could hear somebody crying. And I said, I've been crying the whole way to your house. The whole way to your house.
This is a beautiful, beautiful. So we're
And my niece had a knee-jerking response when she looked at her daughter, like, how could this possibly be happening? She didn't speak of it or talk about it like, oh my goodness, but I just got chills.
Oh yeah, no, I was starting to cry. This is a beautiful experience. You know what there you go, that's synchronicity right there. Beautiful example. But it's also a shared synchronicity in a way, because they were picking up on you as well. And so see, that's what it is. That's that collective consciousness. That's an example of that. So thank you so much for sharing that, and my condolences for his passing. I'm so sorry. But just know he's always with you. He's telling you that, right? He's telling you that through that song, so. Yeah.
I have either a coincidence or a situation. My husband died on the 22nd of May, Memorial Day weekend in 2020. And the kids, 2 children were with me at that time. We went through the procedures, and they suggested we take a walk. Let's go for a hike. Let's get out of the house. This was several days later. We went down to Laguna Beach. We went north and up where you could walk along you could see the whole ocean. I don't know what park it was, but it was off the main drag past Heisler Park. And we went into the neighborhood. We parked out the neighborhood on the street. There was no one around when we got there because it was fairly early. We went up for our walk. On the way down, we had water with us, bottled waters, and we marked them because Christopher had all the water with us, so with him in his backpack, because I needed a cane to get myself around. And so when we went down to the car, things had filled up. The street was filled up both sides. And there was a car in front of us. We took the water bottles out of now we had marked them. Mine, M for Maureen, A for Annie, and C for Christopher. And they gave the bottles to me, and I put them down on the car bumper in front of us, never thinking anything about it.
Right.
And we were ready to get in the car. We turned around, and there the bottles were MAC. And we called my husband Matt.
Oh my God.
But wait a minute.
Oh my God.
The license plate on the car in front of us said McGrath, McGrath, and it was from Pennsylvania, and he was from Langhorne, Pennsylvania.
There you go. See, this is how it works. I believe this is how synchronicity, again, gateway to communicating. I'm telling you.
When my mother was dying, many people came to visit her. Her room was a happy, happy room, and all the people were happy, and she was very unhappy with me because I couldn't see them too. And I was wondering, are all the people who come to visit you on your deathbed people that you want to see? Or sometimes are there people you don't want to see?
Maybe they want to just get that one message back into you or something. Yeah, that's funny. I like that. That's cool.
Thank you for your presentation, and I'm sorry that I couldn't absorb. Been feeling a little bit lately. Anyway,
apologies.
Okay.
None needed. I get it.
yeah, I haven't been feeling perfectly well lately. Anyway, I just wondered if this is within there or within the things that you mentioned, or this might be the empaths have high intuition, but it might be something in there. In San Diego, I was traveling in the right lane on 8 East,
Oh, that's freeway. Oh.
and the hotel circle,
Yeah, right in there. Yeah.
where all the tourists who don't know what they're doing, anyway, the hotels are there, they want to get off. And I was driving and I was in the most right lane, so I had absolutely no reason to look to my left, but I felt this word, accident, so it might be something there. Anyway, and when I looked, there was a white car with two ladies. It happened so fast, but I'll never forget their faces. And I knew they were tourists. And I'm going like, holy crap, I'm going to be in an accident. So the word accident stuck to me, and I just I pressed on my accelerator as fast as I could, and I zoomed, and I avoided the accident.
That's phenomenal. That's innate intuition, but I would also say perhaps a combination of maybe that, or maybe your guide was talking to you, because I think we all have guides. That's a real cool story. These are phenomenal stories and sharing, so thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you again so much for having me. It was really a pleasure.